this week's program. We're going to be looking at winter racing of the galloping type. We're also going to be looking at StockX and seeing how they've been going. It's revolutionising the whole stock selling and buying process, I understand. And also have a look at a new but yet very old vegetable. But in just a moment or two, it's the history and the changing face of horticulture with Jim Grierson. Jim, let's look back, because we normally talk about what's happening at the moment. Let's look back at horticulture. Has it changed much?
Well, over the last 35, 38 years that I've been involved, Rob, yes it has. There's been some cycles, some being good, some being not so good. But overall, the structure of the horticulture with the development of horticulture in New Zealand over the last sort of 15 years, having a spokesman for the smaller horticultural sectors under one umbrella going to the government has been hugely beneficial, and it really is helping the overall bigger picture of horticulture achieving the goals that they wish to achieve, which is 10 billion turnover exports out of New Zealand by 2020, and that's just 5 minutes down the road really, and that's on target. I mean, the big ones are the apples and the kiwi fruit and probably to a lesser extent onions and things like that, but then of course you've got the wine too, so there's some really big sectors in there. But there's a lot of smaller sectors that have had real cyclic problems. The berry fruit industry, the avocado industry, the tamarillo industry, to carrots and to fresh lettuce and what have you out to Saudi Arabia and things like that. They're all there, and they're still perking away quite nicely. People don't really realise so much about those. And the interesting thing is that right at the moment, we're in really good heart as a sector of the primary industry. Apples are going, being the best quality apples we've had, and they've got good prices in Europe and Asia and America. So we've actually spread our reach there, especially into Asia, especially into America. We've got a very good kiwi fruit industry now that's single phased and marketing extremely well with a very, very good product. In that they adapted not only the green further down the track over those 35, 40 years, but also fought PSA. They've got gold out there, and now there's going to be the odd other different colour coming through. That it's all about our plant breeding, and that's really put New Zealand's kiwi fruit back in the forefront of the world, and that's just marvellous for a small country. And then you have a look at the wine industry. I mean, what a success that's been. It's so young in terms of its history, if you look at it from a global perspective. We're 35 years old or something like that in general terms, but we're punching our weight there too with very good, high quality fruit flavoured wines that they can't produce in environmentally lesser environments around Europe. So with our clear skies and our good environmental practice that we do have in New Zealand, we are producing fruit and vegetables with high flavour, high colour and good taste. And that is a reflection of the environment we actually live in.
So it's the environment and of course our plant breeding.
Absolutely, the base of it is plant breeding, and fortunately over the years the government have stumped up with some reasonable money, and the actual industry sectors themselves have said, look, we've got to be in the plant breeding game, got to be in the research game. To keep ahead. I can remember when the Braeburn apple first came to fore in the apple industry back in the very early 90s. I mean, it was way ahead of anything else in the world. Now we've taken that apple from a green-red type apple, very firm but good apple, to something that's now a much higher in colour, longer in storage, and really filling up some big gaps around the globe. And that's purely plant breeding. So,
but it's still a Braeburn though.
It's still a Braeburn, and it's still an apple. You bite it and crunch it, and it's really nice to eat. So it's spectacular. Our potato industry has been another one that's been really interesting. We've sent potatoes to Fiji and the other islands for many, many years, but now we've got gourmet potatoes, and we've got different coloured and flavoured potatoes that are going all over the world, not only but just being consumed in New Zealand. We actually stumped the Australian potato market for quite a number of years through direct plant breeding. We enjoyed that. It was really good to see. They have caught up, and now we're actually collaborating and actually doing the thing together, which is the way it should be. The black currant industry is an interesting one where it's had change, but it's the higher value products that are coming through now, and the guys are sitting down and setting some real targets, and that's once again backbone of that, plant breeding. One that I've followed probably with a fair bit of passion over the years, Rob, has been the hop industry. And today we've got a hop industry in New Zealand that has been led from its plant breeding in terms of the boutique beer industry, which is just exploding around the world. But this is the fourth time I've seen the hop industry come to a rise. The cream has come to the top, and it looks like it's got some legs and longevity now because of our unique varietals that are cultures that are actually cultivars that are actually pulling through the boutique beer industry in big beer consuming countries like Germany and other parts of Europe, and they're hitting the tops, and it's just fantastic. And that looks like it's got longer longevity than it has in the past. It used to be quite cyclic. You'd have a bit of a rush. The big breweries would come out and buy New Zealand fruit hops because the price was right. Well, the price has actually been determined now. It's not price taking. It's not price taking. It's price making, and that makes a huge difference to our horticulture.
Have we changed size and pattern? I mean, in my mind, I keep picturing market gardeners.
Yep.
And have they still got a place?
Oh, absolutely. And they're the hardest working horticulturists that you'll ever see in New Zealand. And they're mainly based around the Chinese immigrants, and they're really hard-working people. And if there's ever an industry that's got to produce a product day in, day out, irrespective of rain, hail or shine, it's the vegetable industry. And once again, our vegetable breeding, our seed, a lot of hybrids. We've had a lot of hybrids, but we've also got a lot of open pollinators. And they've made a much greater difference to our vegetable, especially when it comes to colour and flavour and taste. So we're exporting a lot of fresh vegetables now as far as away as the other side of the world because of how we can fly them out or transport them out under controlled atmosphere and that sort of thing. So that's expanded that. However, we've got the the urban spread in Auckland really getting in amongst the Pukekohe guys now. Those growers that were there are obviously making quite a bit of money in terms of land value, but we're now taking those crops to Waikato, Canterbury, and it's taken a while to get the soil up to speed to produce a number of these vegetables, lettuces, cabbages, cauliflowers, broccoli, those sort of things, and they're big items now. And once you've got your soil up and running, which we've got some beautiful soils down here for those crops in Canterbury and also in the greater part of Waikato, they're really starting to expand. And it's actually it's not so much Chinese based now, it's quite cross section, and there's a lot of good New Zealanders with technology that's taking us through the whole process. And that, Rob, is actually probably one of the most significant things of the last decade has been the GPS, the technologies that have come through, the mapping, the soil profiles, all these sort of things where we're putting on the only amount of fertiliser that is required for that specific crop in that specific area. So the environmental issues aren't as described by some as being as bad as they say they are. The management is far, far way ahead of that. In fact, if you look at the regional councils, and I've been involved with them of recent times in terms of water, and the urban pollution is far greater than the rural pollution, and people just don't believe it, but it's absolutely true.
Yeah, I can believe it. I can. You look at somebody like Robin Oakley, who's going to be on the program shortly, with his candy beetroot. He's doing huge amounts of acreage, and he runs the whole thing on a cell phone.
That's right. It's an incredible operation, Alpine Fresh, and he's done an extremely good job. And it just goes as an example whereby I can remember when Robin, I used to sell a lot of seed to Robin, and when Robin was trying to establish himself as the cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli master of New Zealand, which he has done, and good on him for doing it. It's a fantastic operation. But he had the supermarkets telling him how to run his business, and he actually said, hey, if you want this crop, and you want these products at the quality you want them, and the price you want to buy them at, I've got to actually run your businesses. So they collaborated together, and they've got some really good programs now that allow the consumers to get those vegetables at the right time of the year at a very reasonable price. So it's worked for both ways. It's been great.
I remember when you came out with a small box of baby potatoes.
Yep.
Within 12 months, there was a range of them.
Yes.
But he moved on to the next thing.
Yep. Yeah. And that's what we've got as a little country. We are very innovative. We're way ahead. I've had trips to America. I've been lucky to have trips to America, trips to Europe, and unfortunately they're still 5 to 7 years behind us in terms of technology. The reason being we're an export country. They're a consumption country. those countries. They consume just about everything they grow. They import some stuff, thank goodness. Hopefully most of it's from New Zealand. But we rely, 90% of our horticulture is actually exported. So we've got to be right up there. And we're not going to apologise for the fact that we're up the top end of the market. We're in the niche sort of market area, which we've got to be. So the prices are high and the markets are smaller and far more challenging. But that's where the profits, in the end, come back to the country.
I suppose to a degree now the whole world, civilised world,
Yep.
Expects to be able to have a full range of everything 12 months of the year.
You're absolutely right.
So that comes into our favour.
Yep, absolutely it does. And in fact, we were shown that way back, if you can remember, back in the early 90s when Queensland tomatoes came into New Zealand right at the height of our tomatoes and/or right through the winter. But what it actually did, it educated our consumers in New Zealand to eat tomatoes all year, and they got used to eating tomatoes all year round. Now we've got the breeding to actually produce tomatoes all year round and export tomatoes. So, you know, out of adversity comes, you know, opportunity, and that's a pretty good example.
People like McDonald's who grow fresh,
yes,
and in New Zealand, they must consume a huge volume of tomatoes and lettuces, and
they do.
And yet we have to supply them 12 months of the year.
We have to supply them 12 months a year, and KFC with the coleslaws is absolutely huge. The cabbages that go into there are huge. You know, we can't necessarily produce them all the time, but the collaboration we've got now with our Australasian colleagues is actually working. So we're managing to you know, fulfil those markets collectively, and in some areas you just got to do that. You've got to compete to actually come through and get the consumers solved. So compete, but be competitive, and be cooperative at the same time. So there's key things that have happened, Rob. Yes, we'll have some swings and lows in the future. That's life. But plant breeding, technology, and the fact that little old New Zealand can produce really high quality is a huge thing for horticulture, and it's just going to keep growing.
In spite of the weather.
In spite of the weather.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. Just a moment or two, we're going to be having a chat with Robin Oakley, who obviously we've been chatting about. He's come up with a new beet, which is apparently very old. Candy beetroot. Now, what's the story behind that?
It's a new product, but then it's an old product. It is beetroot. It's not some Frankenstein engineering. It's the roots of it go back to, I think it's what they call a Chioggia type beet, and it formerly comes from Italy, and it's through natural selection that it's turned up. But it looks like a beet from the outside, albeit a light pinker, not the dark colour. But when you slice it in half, you got the rings in there of the pink and the white, and it looks quite different to your normal, very dark coloured beetroot. And one of the other attributes that it doesn't share with the normal dark coloured beetroot is the dark stuff. You get a lot of staining, and it gets all over your hands and all over everything in the kitchen. And if you try and cook it with something else, it's all over that as well, and everything comes out a nice purple colour. But with the candy beet, there's no colour messes up with anything else, but they still taste very similar. Like if you put a blindfold on, try one and then the other, it's like, yeah, they're pretty similar. So they look poles apart, but they're not. They grow the same, they eat the same. Cooking wise, I mean, my favourite way to eat beetroot is roasted, because I'm a bit lazy and you just throw it in the roasting dish with everything else and voila, they're cooked. But the normal beet take quite a while to cook. They usually take half as long again as your potatoes and your pumpkins and all the other goodies you got in there. But the candy beet cook in the same time, and they're delicious. Really, really nice.
So how are you introducing candy beet to the New Zealand population?
We can't really just put it on the shelf because no one sees it as a loose product, so that's why we've gone as a packaged product, so we can highlight the colour of what it looks like inside. So we're trying to get it out there so people see something that's different, and it's been talked about a bit in some of the foodie magazines, and it's just starting slowly, and it's something I don't think it's ever going to take the world, but it's just another product that's out there. And it's like a lot of the vegetables, you go back 15 years, spuds, swedes, carrots, pumpkins, cabbage was about your winter vegetable lineup, parsnips, a few other things. You go in there now, there's a heap of stuff, and within each category things are getting more diversified. Tomatoes, you don't just buy a tomato anymore. There's a range of tomatoes you buy now, and it's like potatoes. You don't just have your Ilam Hardys and your Ruas now. There's a whole range of potatoes going on, and I think largely it's driven by people wanting to be a bit experimental, people appreciating the differences between the product. Like if you enjoy your food and you're conscious about what you're eating, you'll pick up the taste differences and the visual appearances. And I think people are more wanting to replicate what's going on at the restaurants. So the restaurants set a good standard, and a lot of the chefs and food writers of what can be done, and they're really good experiences. And I think people are wanting to recreate and be a bit adventurous at home.
And we do eat with our eyes, don't we?
Oh, we do. You go into some of the stores and they've got these purple carrots now. They look terrible looking things, but hey, I bet they probably taste quite nice, and they're another colour on the plate. It's all about presentation.
So you as a grower, you had to go and get the seed and then learn how to grow them.
Yes, well, we just started out very small, got the seed. The seed quality was pretty bad to start with, so it was a bit hit and miss with plant populations and things, but it was just about growing a few beside our ones we're already growing.
There's another whole lot of spuds that are about to come out of the ground, Robin.
Yep, actually they're heading down to dig beetroot right now, actually. They're going right down to dig a wee bit of candy beet just now, so it's right hot on the topic.
Is it easy to grow?
Beetroot's easy to grow, but dealing with the weeds is a bit tricky. So some crops are easier and harder to grow than others. Difficult to manage the weeds. Very difficult to manage the weeds with beetroot. But the candy beet's no more difficult to grow than the normal beetroot.
And where have you got it so that people who want to have a go at the candy beet can lay their hands on some?
Yeah, if you get to your local New World, definitely you should expect to find them in there. That's mainly where they are currently, yes.
After the break, it's winter racing in amongst all the heavy soils and tracks, and also we'll be talking about selling of stock. How's the season been?
Pretty good, Rob. Yeah, it's quite a successful season. Tuning out a few winners and that, winning a few feature meetings here at Riccarton and that. So yeah, quite more than happy with the way it's been going.
I guess you probably don't have a season. I guess you just have a year.
Well, basically you do, but different seasons. Obviously, autumn, spring, winter. But this is the fun part now, winter. Look at it.
That leads me on to the fact, when it's raining, we all hunker down inside, but you guys have got to keep going.
Yeah, unfortunately, you just got to suck it up and soldier on. They've got to get work still, but it's not the most pleasant time of the year, but it is what it is.
As far as training is concerned, is it a different regime because of the heavy going?
Yeah, well, they're all individuals, Rob, but basically they do take a lot more work to get through the heavy tracks as opposed to summer when they're racing on top of the ground. They have to be really rock hard fit this time of year to cop these heavy 10s and that, so a lot more work goes into them.
Are they more prone to injury when it's cold?
No difference. In fact, the winter's probably the best time for them. They don't get a bug or anything. The cold weather kills any virus or bugs going around, so and that side of things, it's just a lot better for the horses.
And nutrition, does that stay the same? Well, we're inclined to eat roast dinners, aren't we? So,
well, basically, the horses are the same, Rob. They eat a lot more in the winter. As you know yourself, when it's cold, you need some more energy, so they do eat a lot more.
And what about syndication? Because it's a very easy way of people getting into your industry as an owner.
Well, that's where it's going now, Rob. The days of one bloke owning a horse, they're basically gone. It's just so expensive to race a horse now. So syndicate's the way to go. Usually have 10 in a syndicate. Costs them a small outlay for a lot of fun.
Do people approach people like yourself, Danny?
Oh yeah, I've got a good client base sort of thing, and there's always people ringing up for a share on a horse and that, just to have a day out at the races, basically.
Rule of thumb, or is there sort of a guideline on what it's going to cost a syndicate of 10, for example, each one of those people for the training fees?
Yeah, they pay, basically they honestly pay for the daily training fee, float fees, nominations and jockeys, so divided 10 ways, it's pretty available to do.
And then of course the horses aren't being trained 12 months of the year, are they? They do have time out.
Oh, for sure. Like here, it's a transition period. All the summer horses have gone out. The winter ones have come in. So just horses for courses and seasons.
What makes you decide which horses are going to be summer and which ones are going to be winter?
Oh, Look, most of the winter horses are bred to be wet tracker sort of thing, and as rule of thumb, it's not always the way, but the only way to find out is line them up on a wet track sort of thing, and if they handle it, they handle it. If they don't, they go to the paddock and try something else.
Shape? I mean, I'm thinking about the big hind quarters for the heavy going.
No, actually, those big heavy horses, they're the ones that sort of don't get through it as good. You know, it's a lighter frame ones with the smaller feet can skip through the mud. So those big bulky horses, they sometimes struggle on the real heavy tracks.
And then of course we've got the jumping season looming as well.
Yeah, it's always a great part of the year. I look forward to it, sort of thing.
Well, you're an ex-jumping trot.
Yeah, no brains. But like winter racing would be boring without jumps. You know, watching maidens go around on heavy tens and that. So, and you know, you get a lot more people at the races. Like over National Week, people just come out of the woodwork to watch jumpers go around.
People were syndicating coming into jumpers, or are they mainly the flat?
Oh no, but they're pretty diversified. You know, some like jumpers, some don't. But I've always never had trouble getting a syndicate for a jumper.
And how do you train them to go over jumps? Because they apparently they don't see what's directly in front of them.
Oh, you start from scratch. You start jumping over wee logs and that, and just slowly up the ante and jumping bigger and bigger as they get on.
So this is like show jumping training.
Basically.
But it's flat out.
Flat out, well, you go a bit quicker, and you don't jump as high.
Jason, Stock X, what's the background?
Stock X, Rob. Well, it's been going for a few years in terms of its conception before it's been released to market. So the background's a couple of guys got together in Hawke's Bay, John Cannon and Andrew Russell, a farm consultant and a farmer respectively, and had a view that the world of livestock trading needed to change, and that there was too much cost and inefficiency involved in that. They put together a bit of a product called StockX, and they took that to market and raised some capital, and we've got 45 shareholders. About 30 of those are actively farming themselves, and look to build a model that can change the way livestock's traded nationally.
Because the world has moved on as far as the traditional farming that's been going back a couple of hundred years.
Yeah, significantly. So livestock trading online is nothing new. But it is to New Zealand, and a few entities have had a go at doing this in the past, and in large part they haven't addressed the critical factor, and the critical factor in livestock trading is how do you address the transaction to make sure that it's safe and secure for buyers and sellers to trade, and at StockX we think we've delivered on that.
Well, I was just going to ask you, how did you do that? What are you doing?
So what we've done is we've standardised the livestock descriptions for different livestock categories and classes. And a listing, when it's created by a seller, that seller is guaranteeing that they will deliver that quality of animals as described to the buyer. The buyer is required to place funds into a trust account before the stock leave the seller's property. That gives both parties security around the transaction, knowing that what has been represented to be sold will be delivered, and correspondingly the money won't go to the seller of the livestock until the buyer receives the stock as described.
And is happy with them.
Absolutely. And so there's a feedback rating where the buyer and seller can rate each other on the transaction, and it's completely transparent. So buyer and seller can see information about who they are, where they are located, and what type of farming activity they're involved in.
Who organises the transport?
The buyer typically, but we can help facilitate that if the parties choose to use us.
And obviously somebody has to pay the ferryman.
Yeah, absolutely. So generally that's buyer's cost, as is typically the case, unless there's some specifics around the transaction that are seeing the seller pay the freight.
So how do you get 3 meals a day?
We get our 3 meals a day only by charging a small commission at the conclusion of a successful trade. So we're entirely success-based, and we're 2.5% as opposed to the industry standard of 5 to 6% for store stock transactions. And what StockX does, Rob, is quite interesting. It's a disintermediator. So we're taking out the middleman. We're taking out those positions where agents buy stock on behalf of themselves and sell on at a profit. We're removing the transport costs and the yarding fees, and obviously the commission difference from a seller's perspective of getting to market. So that can make a considerable difference to both buyers and sellers around the value that they get from a transaction.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of buyers who would suggest that they want to actually eyeball the stock.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is entirely achievable through StockX. So again, remembering that it's a completely transparent market, you can see who you're buying from, you can find out the details around the seller, where they're located, and phone numbers and names. You can arrange to go and see the stock, and we have a lot of buyers that do that. So while you can buy over the internet, you can have a standardised description of the livestock, you can see video and photos of animals, you can see weight files, growth rates, all those attributes that you may want to inquire about a line of stock and to ascertain its quality. You can also arrange to go and see them in the flesh. We absolutely encourage that, and that happens frequently.
As far as uptake is concerned?
We've got about 1,800 farmers that have registered with us in the 18 months that we've been operating, and that's growing significantly month on month. So we're seeing that that escalation in registrations and certainly in trading activity as well.
Is this based on what's happening overseas?
Do you mean in terms of market uptake and the transition for farmers? I think so. I think farmers as a category of people in the New Zealand economy are adopting technology rapidly, much more quickly than probably a lot of people realise, and that's driven by access to internet connectivity, but also it's about driving cost out of their businesses and increasing the efficiencies that they can achieve through livestock trading. And having a platform orientation around StockX allows buyers and sellers to have access to a national market, and that's really important because what that does is that smooths out prices or opportunities to purchase different categories of livestock that people might be interested in acquiring, that they don't normally have access to through their agency contacts, which is limited to the contacts that person knows.
Jason, how's the price for stock established? Is it an auction system or is it a set price?
So the pricing mechanism for StockX and the transaction process is one of open tender, Rob. So that allows a seller to list livestock, put a price indication. Now that price indication isn't a reserve, and that allows buyers to bid, and they may bid higher or lower than the price indication depending on how the market is performing within the week. The seller then has the choice of who they might want to sell to, or not at all.
Oh, okay, so just because you've got 700 heifers doesn't mean to say that the price is going to be what you want.
No, that's right. So you don't have to be committed to selling. And that is what an auction does, doesn't it? It gives you a commitment to a process without a known outcome. So the open tender situation gives a lot of choice and a lot of control back to the selling farmer.
You don't have to pay for transport to get them to a yard and back if you don't sell them, I guess.
Absolutely, and that is often the unenviable situation that sellers are placed in, when they put all that effort into raising their stock and sending them to market. So there's that transport cost to get them there, again the yardage fees, and again the commission rates that are payable in that normal traditional market, 5-6%. All of those costs are sunk ahead of an unknown outcome as to price. So StockX, you get an opportunity to meet the market, find out what value you can achieve, and then choose what the price is that you want to accept.
If a buyer puts an unrealistic figure on it, because I'm thinking of real estate, everybody wants to double their price, that it won't sell. So there's no.
That's right. And interestingly, the buyers in StockX are generally quite responsible in how they respond to price, because StockX is just another market within a multitude of livestock market opportunities out there. So prices generally are relatively robust across markets. So the seller and the buyer has very, very little risk associated with a transaction through StockX.
People can see the stock on their computer screen?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a complement of videos and complement of photos, and again you can upload weight files. They may be from for example, your true test scales, which can show growth rates for animals relating to the individual EID tag numbers. So there's a preponderance of information that a buyer can interrogate or look to give them confidence that what they're buying is what they require.
And it's across the board. It's sheep, beef and dairy.
Sheep, beef, dairy and deer, Rob. So all store stock transactions are catered to within StockX.
Is it seasonal? I guess it probably is.
All livestock transactions are seasonal, and the way we address, or an interesting way in which we address that, is allowing buyers to put up stock wanted notices. So this is a two-sided market.
So it allows sellers to sell and buyers to inquire of the market for livestock they're wanting to buy. Also, there's a whole lot of functionality on the exchange whereby you can set up personalised alerts, which can of course be seasonal. So if you're looking for store lambs during the store lamb season, you perhaps might be looking for lines of lambs in excess of 500. Every time a listing of that type gets listed on StockX, the system will send you an alert, and it goes direct to your smartphone. You click a link and then you can bid on them. So we've had people that have been driving the tractor doing cropping, and they've bought the complement of their trading lambs for the season. We've had people that have had their feet up by the fire the night before a sale when the weather's been quite stormy and thought, I'd rather probably not go to the sale yards, and they've been able to purchase stock from the comfort of their living room lounge.
Jason, we've come a hell of a long way, haven't we?
We have, and I think there's a lot further that we can go, and we're just really starting on a journey, Rob, that's going to see a lot of change and a lot of functionality and transactional capabilities delivered to farmers through technology, and that's going to unlock a lot of value.
Definitely changing times, and after the break we're going to be looking at the mental health as far as youth is concerned. We have played this before, but I think it needs to be played again. Suicide and depression. There's no limit to age or gender. It can strike anybody of any age, and when it does, those that are left will take it personally.
Yeah, it is personal. In my family, even though my sister had mental health issues for quite a long period of her life, a year ago she decided that it was just too much, and by herself just decided to end it, and her body wasn't actually discovered for 3 days, and that's really tough. We knew she had issues, we'd supported her through a whole lot of things, and in the end, coming out the other side, she's supposedly a lot better, and then it happens. So yeah, it is personal, and it makes me think that if that can happen to us, and we're well experienced with understanding mental illness and understanding how difficult it is, if we didn't see it coming, how does the average person in New Zealand that doesn't have normal contact with that sort of thing, how do you identify these things?
One of our club members, we've got 15 clubs in the region, Cambridge Club, we had a member who committed suicide mid last year. So Kevin took his own life, and that had pretty astronomical effect onwards throughout the members, and then of course for us here in the region. A really friendly guy, super outgoing, so obviously real shock to get that phone call.
Kevin was someone who was a part of the club, and someone who he was always there, always helping out, always willing to give his time, and had a big smile on his face. So while I haven't been around the club a lot recently, certainly know Kevin and know how loved he was by everybody, and how I guess any club, any community, rugby, netball, young farmers, you do look out for each other, and so you do feel it when you lose someone.
A young guy, 28, decided that it was too much for him, and had young girls, really tragic. And we had club members that saw him the day before, and there was no sign. And so I thought, right, we've got to do something about this. We've got to take ownership of the fact that young people in particular have very little opportunity to understand, identify, and then do something about and feel comfortable and confident to confront suicide. Even the word suicide, people don't want to say. So yeah, it's personal from a family point of view, and then from our organisation. We've lost 3 people in the last couple of years, 3 too many, and it's a tragedy that I think can be averted.
For Sam Robinson, it's very personal.
Extremely personal. It doesn't get much closer, to be honest. Yeah.
So what's your story?
If I had access to my guns, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you. I've been battling depression since I was 17, 10 years. Didn't admit it for about 5 years, and it's been with me ever since.
What did you do, Sam?
if I finally, once I started speaking about it, going to a lot of doctors, I'm on antidepressants, different psychologists, cognitive behaviour therapy, trying everything to try and get rid of it.
And it hangs in there.
Definitely, you think you're getting past it and it comes back and grabs you and pulls you down even more.
So how do we fix it when people won't talk, but they will hide it?
Sometimes we can just sense that something's not right, and sometimes we don't know what to say, or should we say anything, or should it be someone else's job. But I think it is all of our jobs just to say, hey, not how are you, but how are you really doing, and to just give people opportunity, space. Some people don't like that really direct question, so going for a walk or hopping in the truck and going for a drive, so that you're not often face to face, but you can talk side by side, and sometimes that works really well too. And you're right, asking the question and not being afraid. It's everybody's job to look out for each other. It's what we're here for.
New Zealand Young Farmers has really taken the lead on this. We feel that we cannot hide when something happens, and so we had a couple of incidents last year, and one was a tragic suicide of a father with young children. And the point from that was that we didn't shy away from it. We didn't try and cover it up. We brought it out in the open and said, look, we understand there are issues out in our community. There's a lot of pressure on young people. There always has been, but there's even more today, I think, particularly with university and the way things are going. And I think we are saying, let's be transparent. Let's go to our club meetings and say, hey, we're not going to feel all right all of the time, and it's okay to talk about it. So this Good Yarn Workshop initiative and the work we're putting in is all about protecting our young people, nurturing them and giving them an environment where they can talk and speak freely. And in that room today, I've seen that already with young farmer members, just talking openly about their experiences. And at the end of the day, the reality is over 50% of those people in that room will just, they'll suffer depression at some stage in their life, and it may not be diagnosed.
That's the thing, we just need to make it more open and more acceptable to talk about it. At the minute, someone that's struggling doesn't want to talk, and people sort of ignore the fact, and they need to take it on themselves to notice the signs of people that are struggling, that are closing themselves off, lashing out, acting differently, and ask them if they're all right, and keep asking if they're all right, rather than just thinking it's not their problem. And yeah, hopefully we can change the societal view that depression's okay to talk about.
And then there's the stigma. If only we could come up with a word that didn't say committed suicide, because that reeks of it being of crime, but it's not. But the stigma is very real.
Well, we find there's a bit of a stigma attached to it, especially in the farming community. There's a bit of a get on with it approach, or man up, or those kind of words attached with it. So becoming a facilitator of this program, one of the things I wanted to get across to people was that it's not a bad thing to be suffering from mental health, and those stigmas are pretty old school. So these days we just need to help people through it and show them support rather than attaching that stigma to it.
My own father committed suicide when I was 5 years old, and I lived in a rural community, and there was a huge stigma around it, so much so that I was kind of labelled as the child that, whose father committed suicide 15 years later. And I can say honestly to this day, that every day I think of him, and it affects the way I am and who I am today. So the after effects of suicide is just tremendous. It doesn't go away. I wonder every day what he would think of me now, and who I am and who I've become, and wonder what he would have been like, because he died younger than I am now, and that's quite an eerie thought, really.
And it's so judgmental, and that's something that, and I guess I was as judgmental as the next person until you experience it yourself. You know what? These people don't decide to do it just to annoy other people, or they're not thinking about consequences. They're not thinking what the impact is to people around them. Like this guy I was talking about, a young farmers member, had 2 preschool girls. Now he wasn't thinking, I'm going to screw their lives up potentially by doing this. So to me, the commit word is a blame word, and we've got to move away from that.
It's bloody terrible, especially when I started as a young bloke, testosterone fueled. The last thing I want to do is be labelled as weak or not right in the head and all sorts, and that sort of crashes you and holds you back from talking about it. It makes it worse. You just chew in your own head and you never get away from it.
There is a huge stigma around depression, and we think we are getting on top of it, but really we're not. When you talk to the rural community, it is inherently inside that community, that stigma. I did not tell anyone I had depression until recently. About 2 years ago, I started speaking out about it and saying, look, I don't care if you know if I had depression, it doesn't change me as a person. And I think people like John Kerwin have made great inroads in that area, and Doug Avery, by speaking out. But we need more people to come forward. We need more people to tell their stories. And some of our young farmer members have been so brave in telling us their stories, and it's helped. Every time someone tells a story, there's 100 people will contact us and say, look, I've had the same thing. I'm so grateful they spoke out. So be brave, share your story, because that's the only way we're going to improve the situation.
Young people have very different pressures to the rest of us.
Well, they're everywhere. They come from every angle because the world's so massive. You're expected to know what you're going to do. Parents, grandparents, everyone thinks you should know what you want to do from when you're young. And if you don't fit that mould, well, you're quite trapped. It sort of can get into your head and bury you with the pressure. And it's bloody hard for a young person to deal with that pressure. And then it goes back to talking. Can they talk to someone about it, or do they bottle it up? And it can just trap them even more.
Everyone has pressures in their life. I don't think it matters how old you are. I do think we're probably much more socially connected, but I think it is different. Like, it's a different type of connectivity, and the fact that it isn't that human relation. You can read a Facebook post and it seems really happy, but we can often, the Instagram effect, where you just see the happy snippets of everyone's life, so you can judge that against actually what's the real life in your life, which is not always so great. But that's life, it's the whole package, and it's learning how to deal with that. And I think that's probably something that we have that's a little bit different in terms of that social media and how that affects us.
I since found out on both sides of my family there is a history of depression, and it was kept under the carpet, as you say. And I myself, I have 3 siblings, and I suffered from depression at an early age, in my early 20s, at a time when I was on top of the world. I think I just won a major journalism award. Everything was going well in my life, and my friends would not have known how I was feeling. And I just, really hit the wall. And actually, I remember one day driving to work at Timaru and thinking, it'd be so peaceful to drive into the river, and it would be all over. And once I realised how serious that was, I did seek help. And it's not something that ever goes away. You have to manage it. I'm now off medication, but I certainly went through some pretty low points, and it wasn't something I felt I could openly share with people. And so now when I see young people really struggling, and a lot of them are struggling through university, and a lot of it comes from bullying at school and times like that, or low points in their life, it really concerns me, because I know I've been there, I understand that, it happened to me at the same age, and I know how hard it can be to open up and talk to people and say, hey, I'm not really feeling all right. And that's a really difficult thing for people to understand, that it's not easy for people to go up to someone and say, look, I'm not really feeling that great, because in New Zealand we have a culture of we just get on with it, that's the good old-fashioned culture, but we have to change that mindset if we are to progress and get these statistics down.
Do we need to get young people to learn to talk again? Because, quite frankly, many of us would suggest that they now rely on text messages and Twitter and that sort of communication rather than one-on-one.
We talk a lot through technology today, and sometimes the feelings thing is hard to talk about. I think we do talk. We just need to be not worried about potentially confronting or conflicting a situation, and that if it is going to be difficult, then we still need to not shy away from it and talk about it.
Social media is disgusting. It's sort of ruined everything, in my opinion, because people don't sit down and go to the pub or have a coffee and have a chat about feelings. Through social media you can't show emotion. No one's going to pick up if you're not feeling well. You can just put an act on and everything's fine. And it's like, even my friends and I, we don't sit down and talk that much. It's usually through Facebook or Messenger or text. It just needs to go back to the old ways. If it wasn't there, maybe we wouldn't have such a predicament we do now, with depression and mental health being so massive.
The downside of social media and the reliance on not needing to talk to people is that people are moving further and further away from being able to ask for help in the traditional sense. And that's why I think the great thing about something like New Zealand Young Farmers that groups people together physically is by default you have to talk. And if you see each other often enough to actually notice that someone, and we know that there's plenty of times where people don't show any symptoms or change of personality and they just don't turn up the next day. But for some people where there are actually visible signs, if you think back in hindsight, is be able to go, you know what, Rob, you're not yourself today. Where's Rob that I know? But we don't say that. So we need to empower young people to go, it's all right to talk like that. I employ a lot of young people in the office, and they don't treat me like I treated my boss when I was young, that whole, deference to authority. Young people, one of the things they have got is this skill of just saying it how it is. So I get challenged all the time thinking, could I just get talked to like that? Because it's unusual for me, for young people actually confronting and being, you know what, whatever it is, blah, 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 they're quite happy to do it. So
Blatantly honest.
They are blatantly honest, and it's a good thing. So if we can convert that ability to going a step further and going, what's on your mind? Or, you don't seem right, what's going on? Then we're more likely to get a bit more open communication and people actually saying, no, I don't feel right. And then you can go, okay, what are we going to do about it?
I mean, I think that's part of the beauty of Young Farmers, is that we're actually dragging people out of their comfort zone and into real life conversations, as opposed to hiding behind a screen. So I think that that's something that we've lost a little bit over the last couple of years, but I think it's something that we've definitely realised that we need to kind of come back to, is that just one-on-one conversation.
Is Facebook a problem that's stopping people talking, or is it still a channel that when somebody alerts that there's a problem on Facebook, that we stop, listen and act?
I believe so. There's going to be plenty of cases where people cry wolf, and that's unfortunate. But I think where there is cries of help on Facebook, they should be followed up, because it could be one of the ones that actually is for real. I'd rather waste time with people that are, oh no, I didn't mean it, to, yeah, I did mean it and you've caught me, thank you very much. That's a much more powerful story to go and tell your friends about.
One of the major barriers for young people is feeling alone and isolated within a family or within a group. They don't think that we older people will listen, and 99 times out of 100, they probably don't. So how can we, older generation, help?
Well, Rob, you know yourself, you've had, issues with depression. You've been very brave in speaking out about it, and I applaud you on that. I think what I'm hearing from young people is that the older generation don't necessarily understand depression or have an inability to talk about it with their children. I've heard of some young people who have said their parents still can't get their heads around their children have been diagnosed with depression, and I think that's just the culture they were brought up in, and the fact that you kept your problems to yourself. Farming is a very isolated industry in New Zealand, and because of that, it does inherently leave people to want to bring keep their problems to themselves. And so often we hear of suicides in older farmers who have never spoken out about their feelings, or nobody has ever had any inclination, let alone their partners or their families, that they're suffering. I'm hoping this new generation is going to be different, and by them opening up and being transparent, parents and the older generation can see, hey, it's okay to admit not everything's fine all the time, because nobody's ever happy all the time, are they?
There's a feeling that young people haven't experienced hardship enough to be feeling like this. That's an older person's view. Typically an older person like myself will go, you guys haven't lived yet. What do you know about pressure? What do you know about stress? Work in my life for a day. And that's, again, it's a prejudice. So because there's, and prejudice, we think fly under the radar. They're pretty obvious to the person that you're talking to. So if they feel that older people who are role models, who are peoples of authority, actually aren't approachable because they don't understand, what do? They haven't necessarily got opportunities or skills to actually reach out like you and I might have if we're lucky. We actually might be able to be self-aware enough to go, you know what, I'm not right, I maybe need to ask. A young person certainly doesn't have that ability. And if older people are sort of giving off the impression that, oh, just harden up, or you haven't lived long enough yet to really feel pressure, then there's no solution for them.
they don't quite understand, especially with these social media things. Like, say if it's from bullying or any other pressure, you can't escape it through social media, and parents don't quite understand it's not just going to school or work and it finishes when you walk out the door, but you're constantly in that world of feeling the pressure, feeling everything against you. And I think they need to realise that there's that change, that you're not just safe in your own home anymore, that feelings are real for young people. Like, they do feel the pressure a lot more than they did back in the day because there are so many options, and it's just taking over.
For the older people, I just want to suggest that you may not think that you don't have a relationship with your children that would stop them talking to you. But do you really think that they would? I'd like to congratulate young farmers for their Good Yarn program. That's a step in the right direction. Sadly, it's only a small one at this stage, but I give my full support, and I do hope that their Good Yarn program will reach every young person in New Zealand. It is a serious problem, we all know that, but it's a case of education, it's a case of opening the doors, and it's a case of getting rid of the stigma, because it's no different to a broken leg. That gets healed, mental health gets ignored far too often. Very powerful stuff indeed, and thanks to the New Zealand young farmers for assisting and making that possible to bring to you. Indeed. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed On The Land, but you can catch us on our website, which is ontheland.co.nz. Be back at the same time next week though. Meantime,